you see here, I basically left one of our counters and I deleted the rest of them. So I left our counter up here, and we're going to replace this condition. So remember, I said we need to have a condition for a counter, right? So if I come over here and I just delete that condition and I try to download this thing, it says, whoa, you know what? You need a preceding Boolean logic operation, okay? Yeah, so I have to have some kind of condition here, but it does not have to be a normally open contact. So I'm going to use this space, and that's going to be where we experiment with our comparators. So under counters over here in our instructions palette, we're going to open up the comparator operations. And you can see we've got several different instructions here. It all kind of looks like alphabet soup. Don't worry about that. This stuff is really simple. Look at this. We've got one instruction that determines if two things are equal. One that determines if two things are not equal. One greater than or equal. Less than or equal. Greater than. Less than. Value within a range. Value outside of a range. And then these okay and not okays, checking to see if a number is a valid floating point number. We are not going to get into those because you're pretty much never going to need or use that. But I do want us to look at a couple of these. We really don't need to get exhaustive on these because basically everybody 6 years old and older knows how to use this stuff. So, you know, you're going to figure it out. If you know how to use one or two of these, you know how to use them all. So here we go. I dropped in the equals. And you see it's looking for two different things here. So I'm going to give us a val1 and a val2. And I'll go ahead and define those as global memory so that we can get in and access those on a watch table. So let's come down here and we're going to make that just an unsigned int. And global memory, define, and we already put that in there, didn't we? So let's go into our tags and let's change that right here. Instead of a byte, that's going to be an unsigned int. All right, good. Let's go back to our program. So let's click right here and bring in some branches. And I think we'll mess with about 3 of these things. I think that should be plenty good enough. We'll experiment with the equals. If you know what equals does, I'm sure you'll be able to figure out not equals. We'll go ahead and look at greater than or equal to. And if you can figure that out, I'm sure you can figure out less than or equal, greater than, and less than. And then we'll also check out the in range. And if you can figure out in range, I'm sure out of range will not pose any threat. All right, so let's go ahead and just branch these all right back up here. There we go. So now any one of these 3 conditions should be triggering our counter. And let's hide this so we can see our whole operation here. And we've got our value 1, value 2. And same thing for here. I think we can just go ahead and use those same 2 tags. So val1, val2. And then here we've got a minimum and a maximum and a value. So for a minimum, I'm just going to set that at 5. For a maximum, I'll set that at 10. And for a value, we'll just look at val1. Now, you notice when I put those in, those 2 were still blue or red, and then which means there's a problem with them. But then once I put in that val1, they turned blue because this can look at different data types. So until I put in a value, this didn't know what I was going to be looking at. Once I put in that value, it said, oh, this is an unsigned integer. Yeah, okay, no problem. And then it went ahead and turned everything blue and made everything copacetic and good. Okay, so here's the idea. Any one of these three conditions, if it's true, it's going to make this counter count. So this shouldn't be a byte actually. This should be unsigned int. Okay, so now we've got everything. That's looking at unsigned int. Now everything's looking at the right types of data. Perfect. When these two things are the same value, when val1 and val2 are equal, then we should get a count. Here, if val1 is greater than val2 or it's equal to val2, then we should count up. And here, as long as val1 is in between 5 and 10, our minimum and max values, then we should count up.